Welcome back to another episode of In Their Own Words. Today we're going to go over the civil case that was mentioned during the pretrial hearing of Sheriff Sean Mickey Stines, who shot and killed Judge Kevin Mullins on 9/19/2024. We have only heard rumblings about motive for the case. The two theories that were brought up were regarding Sheriff Stines' daughter and the civil case. This is that civil case. This was electronically filed through the United States District Court, Eastern District of Kentucky, Pikeville Division. This is Sabrina Atkins versus Ben Fields individually and in his official capacity as Deputy Sheriff with the Letcher County Sheriff's Department. Unknown supervisors of Ben Fields and Mickey Stines, Letcher County Sheriff. Comes the plaintiff, Sabrina Atkins, by and through counsel, and for her complaint against the defendant states as follows. Introduction. This is a civil action for damages for violation of the constitutional rights of plaintiff by the defendants, acting under color of state law. In addition, the plaintiff alleges that the defendant Fields is liable under state law. Plaintiff asserts that defendant Fields in his individual and official capacities violated plaintiff's rights secured by the 4th and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution, as well as sections 1, 2, and 10 of the Kentucky Constitution, by subjecting plaintiffs to arbitrary action, unreasonable search and seizure, and deprivation of liberty. The plaintiff also alleges that defendant Fields is liable under state law for damages for false imprisonment, assault and battery, malicious prosecution, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, and gross negligence. Defendant Fields' unknown supervisors and defendant Letcher County Sheriff is alleged to be liable to plaintiff for deliberate indifference in failing to adequately train and supervise defendant Fields. Jurisdiction and venue. The court has original jurisdiction over the action. In addition, the court has supplemental jurisdiction over the state law claims pursuant. Venue is appropriate in this court. Parties. Plaintiff is a resident of Pike County, Kentucky. Defendant Fields was at the time relevant to this complaint acting as a Letcher County Deputy Sheriff. Defendant Fields is sued in his official capacity on the declaratory relief and damages claims, and in his individual capacity to all claims set forth herein. Upon information and belief, defendant Fields is a resident of Letcher County, Kentucky. All items relevant hereto, defendant Fields was acting under color of state law in performing the acts or omissions complained of in this complaint. Defendant Mickey Stines is the duly elected Letcher County Sheriff elected pursuant to Kentucky Constitution, Section 99, and regulates by KRS Chapter 70. Factual allegations. All preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference thereto, as if fully set out herein. Plaintiff was arrested in Letcher County, Kentucky in April 2021. From April 2021 through June 2nd of 2021, plaintiff was incarcerated at the Letcher County Jail. In early June of 2021, plaintiff was released from Letcher County Jail and placed on home incarceration. Defendant Fields and Deputy Sheriff was with Letcher County Sheriff's Department was assigned to be plaintiff's home incarceration officer. After she was released, the plaintiff had a difficult time finding housing accommodations in Letcher County. Defendant Fields was aware of plaintiff's housing issues as well as plaintiff's domestic issues. Defendant Fields visited plaintiff in the evening, the night that she was released from Letcher County Jail, to bring her cigarettes and to console her. At this time, plaintiff notified defendant Fields that she did not have any money to pay for her ankle bracelet, but she was terrified to return to the Letcher County Jail. Defendant Fields made flirtatious comments about plaintiff's looks and body and told her that he was confident that they could work something out. Plaintiff understood these communications to mean that she would receive favorable treatment from defendant Fields if she provided him with sexual favors. Thereafter, plaintiff and defendant communicated on a regular basis by text messages. In late June of 2021, Defendant Fields asked Sabrina to meet her at Letcher County Courthouse in the evening after dark. Defendant Fields took plaintiff into District Judge Mullen's chambers, telling plaintiff that he wanted to meet her there because there were no cameras. At the time, Defendant Fields took off plaintiff's ankle monitor and told her that she would not have to pay the associated fees any longer, but could remain out on home incarceration. Between late June and December of 2021, Defendant Fields met plaintiff at the Letcher County Courthouse in the evening or early morning hours approximately 6 times. During these meetings, Defendant Fields' behavior escalated from flirtatious comments to forcible kissing, to oral schmecks, to intercourse with plaintiff, all of which occurred at the Letcher County Courthouse after hours in Judge Mullen's chambers, hereinafter the schmexual abuse. Plaintiff was coerced and compelled to comply with Defendant Fields' advances, giving Defendant Fields' position of power, and because she could not afford to pay for the ankle monitor and did not want to return to Letcher County Jail. Plaintiff did not consent to the schmexual abuse. These meetings would typically occur the night before plaintiff had court appearances, and Defendant Fields would put plaintiff's ankle monitor back on and otherwise fix it so that she would appear compliant with her home incarceration the following day. Upon information and belief in late December 2021, certain persons at the Letcher County Courthouse were notified that Defendant Fields was having inappropriate communications and/or relations with plaintiff, and were provided text messages evidencing the inappropriate communications and relations. Upon information and belief, Defendant Fields became aware of the information contained in the preceding paragraph. In late December 2021, Defendant Fields stopped communicating with plaintiff by text message or otherwise. Upon information and belief in early January 2022, Defendant Fields filed a complaint against the plaintiff, claiming that she did not comply with the terms of her home incarceration. Upon information and belief, this complaint was filed maliciously by the Defendant Fields in effort to punish plaintiff and in attempt to save his own job and reputation. Plaintiff was arrested on January 26, 2022 in Pike County, Kentucky. Plaintiff is terrified that she will be transferred to the Letcher County Jail, where upon information and belief, Defendant Fields' wife is employed as an officer, whereupon information and belief Defendant Fields was previously employed. Plaintiff had serious concerns for her safety and welfare if she were to be transferred to the Letcher County Jail. Upon information and belief, there were other women who Defendant Fields had similarly abused. Upon information and belief, the Letcher County Sheriff, unknown supervisors of Defendant Fields, failed to adequately train and supervise Defendant Fields. Upon information and belief, the Letcher County Sheriff knew or should have known that Defendant Fields was sexually abusing females, including plaintiff, in his charge. That's interesting. It doesn't say how he should have known that. Upon information and belief, the Letcher County Sheriff did not reasonably respond to reports or suspicions of sexual abuse perpetrated by Defendant Fields. So it sounds like it was reported to him and he didn't follow up. The defendant's conduct described above has caused severe injury to plaintiff, for which she is entitled to recover actual damages in the amount to be determined at trial. Count 1. Defendant Fields violated plaintiff's rights secured by the United States Constitution. All preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference thereto, as if fully set out herein. Defendant Fields knowingly and recklessly engaged in the above described sexual abuse of plaintiff, and such physical contact was objectively unreasonable. Defendant Fields sexually abused the plaintiff and was not rationally related to any. Defendant Fields' sexual abuse of plaintiff was not rationally related to any legitimate governmental purpose and was otherwise excessive. Plaintiff did not consent to physical contact with Defendant Fields. Plaintiff was coerced by Defendant Fields, and to the extent she complied with Defendant Fields' physical contact, did so only because she was intimidated by Defendant Fields, who provided plaintiff with privileges in exchange for sexual favor. The above described actions of defendant Fields constitute a violation of plaintiff's rights to be free from unreasonable search and seizure secured by the United States Constitution. Plaintiff is entitled to recover compensatory damages against defendant Fields in the amount sufficient to fully compensate her for the damages she suffered as a result of the constitutional violation. Defendant Fields willingly, wantonly, recklessly, and maliciously engaged in the unconstitutional conduct described above. Plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damage against defendant Fields in an amount sufficient to punish said defendant Fields, as well as deter him and others similarly situated from committing such violations in the future. All preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference thereto, as if fully set out herein. Plaintiff had a fundamental right to personal security and bodily integrity, extending specifically to the right to be free from sexual abuse. Defendant Fields sexually abused plaintiff in violations of this fundamental right. Defendant Fields' conduct was so oppressive that it shocks the conscious. Defendant Fields' conduct was intended to injure plaintiff in a way unjustifiable by any government interest. The above described actions of defendant Fields constitute a violation of plaintiff's subsistence due process rights secured by the United States Constitution amendments. Plaintiff is entitled to recover compensatory damages against the defendant Fields in an amount sufficient to fully compensate her for the damages she suffered as a result of this constitutional violation. Defendant Fields willfully, wantonly, recklessly, and maliciously engaged in the unconstitutional conduct described above. Plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages against defendant Fields in an amount sufficient to punish said defendant Fields, as well as deter him and others similarly situated from committing such violations in the future. Count 3 is the deliberate indifference, failure to supervise and train actionable. Defendant Fields was inadequately trained in the areas of proper supervision and interaction with female criminal defendants on home incarceration. The defendant's Letcher County Sheriff and unknown supervisors of defendant Fields, together the Letcher County Sheriff's Department, knew or should have known that defendant Fields was abusing his power and taking advantage of females on home incarceration under his control and supervision. Again, it doesn't say how they should have known that. The inadequate training of home incarceration officers employed by the Letcher County Sheriff's Department is likely to result in the ongoing violation of constitutional rights. The Letcher County Sheriff's Department policymakers have been deliberately indifferent to this need for inadequate training. Deliberately indifferent. The Letcher County Sheriff's Department failure to adequately train, supervise, or discipline their employees proximately caused the violation of the plaintiff's constitutional rights. The Letcher County Sheriff's Department substantially caused a constitutional tort to plaintiff through its customs, policy statements, ordinances, regulations, and decisions, officially adopted and promulgated by that body's officers. The acts and omissions of Letcher County Sheriff's Department in failing to adequately train and supervise defendant Fields, as set forth in this complaint, amount to deliberate indifference to the constitutional rights of plaintiff and a complete disregard for the known and obvious consequences of such indifference, all of which resulted in constitutional violations and tortious conduct described in this complaint and therefore are actionable. Plaintiff is entitled to recover compensatory damages against defendant Letcher County Sheriff's Department in an amount sufficient to fully compensate plaintiff for the damages she suffered as a result of the conduct set forth herein. Defendant Letcher County Sheriff's Department acted willfully, wantonly, recklessly, and maliciously engaged in the conduct set forth herein. Plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages against Defendant Letcher County Sheriff's Department in an amount sufficient to punish said defendant for the conduct set forth herein, as well as deter defendant and others similarly situated from engaging in such conduct in the future. Count 4. The above described actions of Defendant Fields were negligent, grossly negligent, and constitute assault and battery. Defendant Fields had a duty to reasonably supervise plaintiff while she was on home incarceration. Defendant Fields violated the duty he had to plaintiff. Defendant Fields' violation of the duty of care he owed to plaintiff proximately caused plaintiff's damages. Plaintiff is entitled to recover compensatory damages against the Defendant Fields in the amount sufficient to fully compensate her for the damages she suffered as a result of tortious conduct of Defendant Fields. Defendant Fields willingly, wantonly, recklessly, and maliciously engaged in the tortious conduct. Plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages. Count 5. Gross negligent infliction of emotional distress. As a direct and proximate result of the above described grossly negligent conduct of Defendant Fields, plaintiff suffered and continues to suffer severe emotional distress. Plaintiff is entitled to recover compensatory damages from Defendant Fields in an amount sufficient to fully compensate her for the damages she suffered as a result of the tortious conduct. Because the conduct of Defendant Fields was grossly negligent, plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages against Defendant Fields in the amount sufficient to punish him for the tortious conduct, as well as deter him and others similarly situated from engaging in such conduct in the future. Count 6 is the IIED. The above described actions of Defendant Fields were intentional and are outrageous, and offend generally accepted community standards of decency and morality. No kidding. As a direct and proximate result of the above described actions of Defendant Fields, plaintiff suffered and continues to suffer severe emotional distress. Plaintiff is entitled to recover compensatory damages against Defendant Fields in the amount sufficient to fully compensate her for the damages she suffered as a result of the tortious and wrongful conduct. Defendant Fields is willingly, wantonly, and recklessly and maliciously engaged in the tortious conduct. Plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages. Wherefore the plaintiff respectfully demands the following relief: an award of compensatory damages against the defendant in an amount sufficient to compensate plaintiff for damages she suffered as a result of the federal constitution violations described herein. An award of compensatory damages against the defendants in the amount sufficient to compensate plaintiff for damages she suffered as a result of the above described basis for liability arising under state law. An award of punitive damages against defendants and in an amount sufficient to punish the defendants and deter them, as well as others similarly situated from engaging in unlawful and unconstitutional conduct in the future. An award of plaintiff's costs incurred in prosecuting this action, including reasonable attorney's fees. An award of any and all other relief which plaintiff may appear entitled, and the plaintiff respectfully demands a trial by jury on all counts so triable. And then respectfully submitted, it is the lawyers for Sabrina Atkins. So that's all 12 pages. That was all that was filed. I downloaded the whole file. The only other thing was a signed affidavit that said that Miss Atkins agreed to everything that was put in this lawsuit. It doesn't quite tell us much more, except that there seemed to be something going on behind the scenes with the sheriff's department, and that it could could be a motive for some of Sherriff Stines' actions. So more to come for that. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help this channel grow.